Hello friends. The chassis of the Scorpio is tuned for comfort. The car just floats over bumps. Simple or real McPherson struts were installed on the front axle of the first generation car. The wheel in the transverse direction was leveled by a simple lever connected to the anti-roll bar. The new generation got more familiar triangular levers. It is worth noting that their rear support is a rod that is inserted into the silent block. Now the wheel was guided more precisely, not to mention a significant increase in suspension life. The Scorpio's levers were extremely strong, no stampings from sheet metal like modern cars, just an honest ebb. Today, the front levers are supplied, including by the Chinese. But such a product is best avoided because these levers are not of the best quality. Analogs from SR line proved to be much better. The biggest problem is with the front shock absorbers, which are hard to come by. The front brake discs are identical to those used in the first Mondeo with a 2.5-liter petrol V6. It seems that Ford was trying to unify the conceptually similar models. There are fewer innovations on the rear axle. As before, triangular oblique levers and a curved beam were installed. The rear axle levers differed depending on the body. The differences concerned the attachment points of shock absorbers and springs. Today, rear arm assemblies are no longer available, only silent blocks can be purchased. Shock absorbers can only be bought on a sedan. The station wagon used Nivamats that maintain the height of the rear regardless of the load. Until 1996, the demand for 4-cylinder gasoline engines was met by a pair of 2-liter naturally aspirated engines. The one that is weaker, with a power of 115 horsepower, was borrowed from its predecessor. It made its debut back in 1989. Despite the 2 camshafts, it had 8 valves. Its 16-valve version developed 136 horsepower. The Ford Scorpio 2, in comparison with its predecessor, gained some weight. If in the previous edition the 8-valve 2.0 had good dynamics, then here it had a hard time. Unfortunately, the 16-valve version did not solve the problem either. You can even say that with it, the situation became even worse because it lacked traction at low revs. By far, the worst thing that could be is a combination with the prehistoric 4-speed automatic. The most optimal engine in terms of driving and reliability appeared in 1996. It was a 16-valve 4-cylinder unit with a volume of 2.3 liters. It replaced the 16-valve 2.0 and had much better potential. While the 2-liter engine was square, i.e. the piston stroke was equal to the diameter and was 86 millimeters, then in the 2.3 the piston had a diameter of 89.6 millimeters and the stroke was 91 millimeters. The 2.9-liter 16-valve V6 Cologne is a 6-cylinder dinosaur from the 60s. This V6 managed to visit Capri, Granada, Sierra, and the first Scorpio. With OHV gas distribution system, single camshaft, and 145 horsepower, sports were out of the question. Nevertheless, the engine drove well and could cover hundreds of thousands of kilometers without major repairs. Unlike modern V6s, it was also offered with a manual transmission. However, fuel consumption never dropped below 13 liters. A top-end 2.9 V6 Cosworth with 207 horsepower, known since 1991 for Scorpio of the first generation. The engine is based on the 12-valve Cologne. 2 camshafts, DOHC, are also installed here. A chain is used to drive the timing until October 31st, 1994, a 2-row chain, the so-called duplex, and from November 1st of 1994, 2 single-row chains, simplex. The valve timing is not regulated. There is control only in the intake duct by the VIS system, Variable Intel System. Such a system is also in the modified 16-valve 2.0. The top engine provides good dynamics, although you expect more from it than you get in reality. Cosworth was intended exclusively for the most expensive trim levels, which means it was connected to the machine and equipped with a multiplex network. Diesel units were supplied by the Italian VM Motori. The blockhead did not resist wear well. It had an atypical design. It was divided into 4 independent parts. Often, some of them burst. In addition, wet liners sank over time, resulting in a loss of coolant. Another technical highlight is the camshaft, located quite high in the block and equipped with a gear system. Never buy a car with this engine. As for the problems, in the best years, they mainly affected the catalyst. 2 lambda probes have already been used here in front of the catalyst and behind it. It happened that the ceramic filler was destroyed, which was accompanied by noise and sometimes a drop in dynamics. Getting a catalyst for Scorpio today is a task worthy of Sherlock Holmes. All engines have a timing chain. If it does not rattle, then it is not worth changing it. The engines were mated to a MT75's 5-speed manual transmission, as well as an archaic A4 LDE 4-speed automatic, except the 8-valve 2.0. The machine is built on the basis of the old A4LD hydraulic box, which was created back in the early 80s. Index E means the presence of electronic control using solenoids, of which there are a total of 6. The main disadvantages of this box are both mechanics and electronics. Here, the brake bands very often wore out. The machine skidded or jerked when switching. Considering that the gearbox control unit is very stingy with information and has practically no diagnostic options, the automatic transmission always has to be disassembled to find the causes of malfunctions. Fortunately, almost all spare parts are still available today. The oil in an automatic transmission should be changed every 30 to 40,000 kilometers. In addition, it is necessary to regularly clean the oil cooler from dirt and fluff. If you ask Scorpio owners today what problems they face, you will most often hear references to corrosion and electrics. In addition, finding spare parts for the second-generation model is quite difficult. No less difficult is the search for a car in the secondary market. Old Fords had mediocre corrosion protection. The Scorpio was no exception. Rust usually attacks the rear fenders first. Finding a specimen that does not have red spots is an almost superhuman task. Even well-preserved specimens are affected by brown plague. Thresholds are also subject to corrosion. In addition, it corrodes the underfloor beams at the rear and the floor reinforcement at the attachment point of the front seat rails. Doors in the area of welded seams are also subject to the brown plague. The first generation didn't rot that much. The second problem concerns electrics, and it affected, first of all, pre-reform cars. At the end of 1997, the situation changed radically. Until then, Siemens wiring was installed, the insulation of which cracked very often. This led to short circuits, and electrical equipment literally lived its own life. Today, replacing the wiring harness with a new one is out of the question. It remains to look for a careful and patient electrician. The second reason for electrical failures is moisture ingress into the fuse and relay box. In all modifications, they are located in the engine compartment. In the top versions, there is another fuse box located in the cabin. It houses the fuses and relays for the automatic 2-zone air conditioner, servotronic power steering, heated windshield, electric drive, and heated front seats. Sometimes the immobilizer relay installed in the dashboard also fails. It can be easily removed and replaced. Some manufacturers by the mid-90s began to switch to multiplex distribution networks. For example, PSA did this in 1994 when they upgraded the Citroën XM and the Peugeot 605 with top-end 6-cylinder engines, resulting in improved handling. The organization of the electrical network in the Scorpio 2 is unique. Ford was only halfway through the Scorpio. The multiplex distribution network, the so-called multiplex, including a special CCM unit, is connected to the third fuse box of the top versions. The network serves exclusively the comfort equipment area, where individual elements are connected by only 2 wires responsible for controlling seats, windows, mirrors, central locking, and other elements. The multiplex from time to time haunted the owners and employees of the services. The Scorpio with 2.9 V6 and 2.5 TCI, TDI, Engines still used the original EEC4 engine management system carried over from the first generation. For this reason, the ECU was connected to an earlier OBD1 diagnostic interface, the so-called StarCode system. The rest of the engines, as well as Diesel 2.5 from 1995, received a more modern EEC5 control unit with an OBD2 interface and a 16-pin connector. The version with the 2.9 V6 12-volt engine was equipped with the old version of the electronics until the end of production in 1996. If you know of other model malfunctions, be sure to write about it.